What's up, everybody? Welcome to stability section of iliotibial band friction syndrome. I'm going to try to be brief on this. If you've been following me for a bit, I'm not great at that, but I'm going to do my best. But also because I feel like most of this syndrome is caused by the previous section, mobility or range of motion deficits, or what's coming next is running form. Two major things that you'll see, running form faults, that I believe contribute to this. So there is a trifecta of this, of what this can cause, that I want to go over because it's a vicious cycle, and hopefully you guys learned something from this, and I hope it helps. So quadricep inhibition, a couple things to go over. Every muscle in our body has a starting point and an ending point. We call it an origin and an insertion. When you contract, that insertion draws near the origin. So to give you an example, imagine like I'm one bone and I've got this long rope to go into another bone. I'm where it starts. Where it goes is the insertion. When I contract that muscle, when that muscle shortens, I'm pulling that rope in, it shortens, that other bone moves, that other person moves. So it depends on where the rope goes, what joints does it cross, is how we're gonna get movement. So that's gonna be important because you have multiple muscles that can achieve a movement, but sometimes it's not as efficient and we get problems and we get this kind of neural retraining. And I'll show you, it's smart. It knows that if you have pain in your knee joint, and it knows that when you activate your quadriceps or you load the joint, if it hurts, your body is naturally going to downregulate that. You ever get knocked in the knee or you get a bruise, you don't want to put weight on it. That's your body's natural reaction, is to not put weight on it. It's go into guard mode, protect mode. So with our quadricep, it's very commonly inhibited when it comes to knee pain. The quadriceps' main job is to straighten your knee. There's 4 of them. They all come down, they have different origins, but they have the same insertion on the tibial tuberosity. So what does that mean? It means they all serve to have the same function. You contract, the muscle shortens, and you get this knee extension. There's some other muscles that can try to do this, but not as efficiently. They're not created as much for it. There's 2 things that can happen. When you're trying to straighten out your knee, if your quadricep is inhibited or you're not fully tapping into it, and you're trying to straighten your knee out, there's 2 things that will happen. The first one is, you'll notice here, is I'm gonna pull, well first you try it now. Put your leg out and try to squeeze your quad and try to straighten your knee out. See what happens. 2 things that commonly happen is, 1, you'll pull your ankle up, you'll actively what we call dorsiflexed, working the muscles in the front compartment. But the reason we do that is to have passive tension of the calf. The calf muscle crosses the knee joint, it'll help to pull your knee straighter. But it's not as efficient. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to, the only thing that can straighten your knee out at that last 20 degrees is your quadricep muscle. Your calf cannot. So by me pulling my ankle up, tightening my calf passively to try to straighten out my knee, it's not as effective. Your calves are gonna be tight. We see the same model here. There's the muscles, the tibialis anterior and the extensor hallucis longus are our main dorsiflexors with that. The other thing that can happen is you can use your glute max, which is a hip extender, to try to straighten your knee out. So you'll see here when I'm doing this incorrectly, my body, my glute is gonna fire and my hips are gonna raise up slightly. That means I'm using my butt, my glute, to try to straighten out my knee. We need to have the ability to isolate specific muscles. Even though they don't always function in isolation, we need to have that motor control to be able to do that. So watch what happens is, as I try to straighten, my butt squeezes, I go up higher. This knee is not all the way straight. Normally, we should be able to just activate our quads and it goes down. The other thing we did was the ankle pulled up, try to tighten back here to pull down, not efficient, not what we're trying to do. The glute, origin, insertion, it's trying to push down, but it doesn't have a good lever arm for that. It's not meant for that. So we're trying to straighten a knee out that is not efficient. We need to be using our quad. So with the drill that you do, and I'll have a picture posted on my link, you're gonna have one finger on your butt, not in your butt, for the love of God. And then the other one is gonna be looking at your ankle. And you're gonna see, can I keep my ankle relaxed? And can I keep my butt relaxed and squeeze that quad muscle? Another good feedback method is to have the other hand that's still free and place it into the quad and the inside. And you should feel like when you contract, it pushes your fingers out. When you get a good contraction, you're gonna feel that firmness at the end range. And you'll notice it's a very different sensation. It feels like you're using your quad. Some cues that I'll use for people is like, imagine you're pushing the back of your knee down towards the table. Imagine you're trying to draw your kneecap up, but you need to be able to do that in isolation from your glute and your ankle. If you've been paying attention, we talked about earlier in the anatomy, What attaches to your IT band? Your glute max. Your quad lays on top of your vastus lateralis. Up higher is the TFL muscle, the tensor fascia lata muscle, which becomes your IT band. But you've got slips that attach to your IT band from that glute max. So if you're constantly using your glutes to try to straighten your knee out in different ranges of the motion, you're gonna have some tightness. You constantly contract, relax. And if we're asking it to do a job that it's not really meant or created for, is at the knee, it's meant to act at the hip, it's not meant to straighten your knee out. And so what's gonna happen is you get some tightness, you get some restrictions, and that's gonna affect the mobility of your IT band. So you need to be able to have the ability to selectively activate your quad. Otherwise, we get this. This is the trifecta. Quadriceps inhibition, we talked about that earlier from the pain. Glute tightness of why that's trying to do the work to straighten out your quad because you can't isolate your quad. And then finally, limited knee extension. If you're not using your quad at that end range, you're gonna lose that motion. If I'm straightening my elbow out, I never go all the way straight, I'm gonna lose it. My tricep is what straightens my elbow. Your quad is the only thing that is gonna straighten your knee out. So if you're trying to use your glute and your ankle to try to straighten it, you're not gonna get full range. So then you lose that last bit of extension. And what happens then? That is the terrible triad. We talked about what causes this in the first place. What ITBS is your IT band flips over that bony prominence. The analogy was this is floss, this is a tooth. I'm constantly going over and over at 30 degrees of knee bending. The moment I bend to 30, it goes from the front of this bone and flips over the side. So it's like the tooth, it flips over. Well, if I'm getting increased tension, if I'm pulling down that floss even harder, if I have increased tightness or tautness of that band, I'm gonna get even more pressure. It's gonna wear away even more. So these three things together can cause the trifecta. So we're trying to, with this, the whole purpose of this is you should be able to isolate your quads. If you cannot, work on it. We'll see if also another aha moment in the mobility section before. One of the predispositions to this is lack of end range knee extension. So chicken or the egg, work on it and find out. Thanks for sticking around and stay tuned for the next section.